Daddy's Day. Happy Zaddy's Day to you, Nick.
Thank you. How you doing this week?
I'm doing okay. I've just been focusing on clients, getting through old emails, just trying to get my head above water with that. Doing some experimenting with AI and with VR. In fact, maybe later on I can show you. I should be able to show you what I can do with VR, because I can share my screen and I can cast to a browser, so we can look at a chart in 3D if you like.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, so that might be kind of fun to do. Maybe. Oh, but how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Working on redesigning my website because it kind of sucks.
Same.
Right. Yeah. So working on that, and also taking clients and and also experimenting with AI, in part thanks to our ongoing collaboration and conversation, which the part of which doesn't usually appear on this broadcast, on this live stream. But yeah, keeping very busy, generally happy, and I've already spoken to my dad. I've already spoken to my daughter, and so the Father's Day thing is sorted, and now it's just time to have fun and talk astrology.
I wish Father's Day happens when the sun is in Cancer. Sometimes it's still in Gemini, but it would really make a lot more sense if it was when the sun's in Cancer, because Mother's Day always happens when the moon is in Taurus. So, I think the sun in Cancer is probably the most cuddly sign.
Mother's Day happens when the sun is in Taurus, not the moon.
Sorry. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, the exaltation of the moon.
I was going to say, like, wow, that's a really well-planned holiday if they managed to pull that off year after year.
Right.
No, it's I think the second Sunday of every May. What's funny for me growing up, my mother's birthday is in May. My dad's birthday is in June. So the holidays have always been conflated, like May is also my parents' wedding anniversary. So May is just like,
the month,
the mom month, and then June is the dad month, and it's all sort of neatly ordered for me, and that's about all in life that was left neatly ordered for me. But there you go, you take what you can get.
Yeah, three of my brothers, two of my brothers and myself, our birthdays are in September and October, so that always ended up kind of being the heavy
right
Virgo Libra month.
Okay, right. So you get like joined parties or whatever?
Oh yeah, no, I had a few of those. Yeah,
Okay.
Sometimes my birthday celebration would get mixed in with like Halloween stuff. So I often had Halloween themed parties, with like zombie cakes and things like that. Sort of, which I guess is appropriate for Scorpio season.
Yeah, but my thing is, being an August baby, I never had birthday in school or anything like that. Like I was usually at summer break. And I remember being 19 and for the first time having to work on my birthday. I was a bike courier, and I'm like, I have to work on my birthday? You mean people do that?
Yeah. I think I've worked every major holiday. Every major holiday there's been, I can remember working during. One time, when I was working at this movie theater, I think I worked, like that particular year, I worked like New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Christmas Eve, Boxing Day, Thanksgiving, Halloween, all of the sort of major
the holiday beat.
It was definitely sad. I thought like, oh, this will, I thought at the time that it was going to sort of help me, and then I sort of realized like, oh, wait a sec, no, it doesn't.
Wow.
You get a pat on the head,
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as usual, we haven't pre-planned any of the astrology we're going to talk about. We tend to come to this all raw and with no sort of
no loop.
No loop.
Yeah. There's no preparation.
That's what I get for being lost for no preparation.
Yeah, this is live television, folks.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is.
No delay. Yeah.
So what we can tell our audience, last one, was it Monday? Was it Monday or Tuesday? We taped an episode with Chris. It'll be the next released episode of the Astrology podcast. And we're talking about Venus retrogrades. So, as if we haven't been covering that topic quite a bit here during these live streams, you're going to get the super Chris Brandon dose of Patrick and I waxing
It was
philosophic on that topic.
how long was it? How long did we end up talking?
We recorded for like over 4 hours. It was 4 hours, 4.5 hours about, or almost.
Yeah, it was a bit of a marathon.
Yeah.
And we didn't even touch on all of the examples that we
That's
were
right.
thinking of.
We had this script that we like, we honed. I mean, not script like every word we say is scripted, but we had a plan, a show plan that we had worked the previous day like over 3 hours preparing.
Yeah, even
and
that just by itself was huge.
right, and a couple of weeks before that, Chris and I had been bantering about what we wanted to include or not include. And then once we got to indeed, we recorded for 4.5 hours, and we didn't cover everything that we wanted to. We left out all kinds of really good, interesting material that didn't make it into the show, or didn't even make it.
Yeah, one of the examples that I had wanted to bring up in that show. Well, I don't know that in the moment I just forgot about, just because we were just going through so much that I couldn't think. But when I was looking back through some of the notes, one of the great Venus retrograde examples I think is if any of you have seen that Netflix show called You, it's about this guy who, if you haven't seen the show, the basic premise is that there's this guy who is a kind of murderous romantic stalker, who he kind of invites the audience along his like delusions and obsessions with a particular woman. And so he kind of tries to somehow play it off as like normal, that he's like stalking this person, but it's like completely abnormal. So it's this kind of psychological thriller, and obviously this is a very, you may be already getting a sense that this is a kind of Scorpio like story about obsession, and so it's so interesting because the actor who plays the lead, the protagonist of this show, the actor Penn Badgley, you might even want to bring up just the day of his natal placements. Let me give you his birthday.
What's his name again?
His name is Penn Badgley, and he was born on November 1st, 1986.
Okay, yeah, right away I know what he.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay,
but it gets better. It gets better. So yeah, he was born on November 1st, 1986. And you'll notice if you bring up the transits of that day, Nick, if you want to share your screen to show us those, you'll see he has a number of planets in the sign of, you guessed it, Scorpio. And he plays this role really well. He's extremely convincing, and he's really got to take that as a compliment, because he obviously could not be further from the character that he plays, but he ends up just through whatever number of coincidences, he's able to play this role really convincingly. And so you can see that he was born with the sun in Scorpio. The moon was most likely in Scorpio.
Likely, yeah.
But could have been in late Libra. But he definitely has Mercury in Scorpio. Certainly has Pluto in Scorpio, but Venus retrograde in Scorpio. Now, the reason why this is significant is obviously not only is this extremely appropriate for the kind of character he's portraying, and I would say at this point, this is probably the character he's most famous for portraying. But the show itself, the first episode premiered in September of 2018, and the episodes ran through until, I believe, through late November of 2018. And of course, that was right in the middle of a Venus retrograde in Scorpio.
Yeah.
The September period that's obviously in the lead up. I think it was in the shadow period at that point, but certainly the whole thing occurred during a red 2. And so it's one of these examples of someone who has this position natally and who is gets this sort of public attention from playing this character for a show that deals heavily in Venus retrograde and Scorpio types of themes, and it comes out at the time of a Venus retrograde in Scorpio. So then I started looking at some of the other people sort of involved in the production, and Jenna Ortega, she's the young actress who plays Wednesday Addams
Oh yeah.
this, in this other show. So she ends up being in the second season of this show, You. And she was also born during a red too. She was also born with Venus retrograde in Scorpio.
Oh, crazy.
Obviously the next year wasn't a Venus retrograde in Scorpio. But then I thought, okay, this is an interesting pattern. So then I looked at the natal placements of the author of the book, because this was based on this book that was released 4 years before I think the show came out.
Okay.
And she has a huge pile up of planets in Scorpio. I can find her birth date.
So I'm looking for the window here.
So look, You. It's written by. It was written by Caroline Kepnes.
Okay.
And she was born on November 10th, 1976. Now, she's not a Venus retrograde.
No.
But she does have a buttload of planets in Scorpio. So I think it's relevant for her as well that, she she dreamt up this kind of story with those sort of natal ingredients. And then the show of her book, first premieres during a Venus retrograde in Scorpio, starring its Venus retrograde in Scorpio lead. I don't know. I just thought this was an interesting number of Scorpio.
It is. And actually, the producer and I think he's just the producer of the show, Greg Berlanti. I'm looking up different people related to the show, and he's born May 24th, 72. So he's got the Venus retrograde going from Cancer to Gemini. So even just at the production end, I find that more and more when I'm looking at television and film production. Even though there's a bunch of people who are anonymous, it's really worth looking up their dates of birth, the cinematographer or what have you, when you're looking at these things, because you get more and more of a sense of, all the people involved in a creative project and how they all sort of influence that. And it's one thing to use the star who's obviously the face and the embodiment of the production, but peeking behind the curtain just for dates, you often get gold there, and it just enhances your absorption of the whole sort of story and the way it unfolds. That is a fantastic example. I wanted to just quickly, as an aside, this is something I like to show people from time to time. This is, you said the show was in 2018 when Venus was
it came out in it premiered in September 2018. The book it was based on was released almost 4 years to the day in September of 2014, which of course was during that would have been during a Blue 2, right? That's during the corresponding Sun Venus exterior conjunction that occurred in Libra to Scorpio.
Right. What I just wanted to show here. So the show started in September, but his birthday in November, because you mentioned, the coincidental, the thing about he turned 32 on this day when the show's going through its first season run. And the thing about 32 is it's a joint return. It's not just a Venus synodic return, it's a simultaneous Mars synodic return.
Nice.
So when he was born, Venus is retrograde here in Scorpio. You can see he was born 24 days before it went direct, 17 days after the retrograde. By the time of his 32nd birthday, Venus is now 14 days prior to its direct station and 26 days after its retrograde station. So that shift is totally normal, 10 days over the course of those 32 years. But then to top it off, he was born 81 days. He's got Venus square Mars. This is what I think is so interesting about this show, because Venus retrograde in itself isn't necessarily sort of, obsession, but it certainly relates to it. There's
well, it's desire.
Desire, seduction, exactly. But with the Mars, you're getting, that's where you're getting, sorry, the stalking. I didn't say so much the seduction, but the stalking, like sort of acting on desire in a
in an
aggressive.
improper way.
Well, let's be neutral and say
Socially unconventional.
right,
way.
proactive. Let's say he's certainly proactive.
That's yeah, that
Yeah.
kind of semantic distortion for this is
Well,
yeah.
and again, the show's being told from his point of view, so
Right.
that's the way the show is being. Hey, I'm really into this girl. Follow me while I do all this creepy stuff.
Well, that's what's also kind of disarming about it, because he's very charming, he's very
Right.
charismatic, he's very intelligent. But all of these kind of disarming things about him are supposed to sort of distract you from the fact that, hey, he went outside that woman's window and like whacked off. Like,
Oof.
that's not normal.
No.
Like,
Nope.
that's
Nope.
completely irregular. Like, it's really that's what it's a very yeah, it's pretty
Yeah. Okay, I got you.
pretty good
I
television.
haven't seen the show, but
Yeah.
that sums it up. Thank you for that review, sir. Anyway, my astrological point is just he was born 81 days after Mars' direct station. And on this day, Mars was 65 days after its direct station. And at 32, you get pretty much like, this is the closest Mars return you'll get until 15 years later at the age of 47, when you get a slightly closer one. But even here, this is zodiacally speaking, it's only 7 degrees off.
Oh yeah,
So
no, for sure.
yeah,
I see exactly what you're saying. It's that tying into that 32-year recurrence of
yeah,
Venus and Mars, which
yeah,
makes perfect sense for
exactly. Because he's only,
everything to do with that.
yeah, he and everyone else, we get the Venus synodic return every 8 years, and that's remarkable in and of itself. But when you see these charts where Venus and Mars are configured like this, right away, go to the age of 32 and find out how that double return is manifesting. Right away, if you showed me this chart, I knew nothing about the person. One of my first questions would be, oh, okay, what was happening as they were turning 32? Where were they in their lives, and how does that Venus Mars square play into the story?
Yeah, I guess, and his answer would probably be, well, I, played this, stalker, on TV, and I had to do had a scene involving myself simulating masturbation, get broadcast to millions of people.
You don't have to keep bringing that part up. What?
No, well, I just bring that up because it's it's
I know.
it's Venus retrograde, right?
I'm having a laugh at your expense,
Yeah,
as usual, as I'm known to do.
Well,
Yeah,
because he also like complained about that in in a recent interview. He's like, he actually asked the writers, like, could you please, could we not have a scene in this new season where I have to do this? Like, every season there's always one scene where I have to do this, and it's do we have to? I guess
well,
it's just because it's the most disturbing kind of thing.
yeah, no, sure. Yeah, I know we're being kind of glib about it because we are sort of childish in that sense, but it's pretty intense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Moving on. Yeah. Trying to scrub that image out of my mind. I was interested in seeing the show. I'm not so sure I want to see it now.
No, it is really good. It is really good.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. The astrological insight, of course, is what really puts it all together. Yeah. Well, no, that is one of the examples we could have used in the show for sure. That would have been a good one. The applying
You
Jupiter
guys
Saturn conjunction.
You're a bit late for that one. That was back in 2020.
Yeah. I think well, I mean, the thing about Jupiter Saturn, that everyone knows about the Saturn return, and some of the people watching have had it already, and some of them
Jupiter
haven't.
Uranus is what they meant.
Oh, okay. All right. So never mind. I was going to go off on some tangent.
Oh.
Yeah, Chelsea. Thanks for confusing us. Yeah.
I still had a million things to say about that Jupiter Saturn conjunction. One thing I thought was really weird is the geocentric Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was, as you know, like December 21st, 2020. But the heliocentric conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn was like on November 5th, 2020, which was in the United States. That was election day itself.
Right.
Which I don't know. I mean, not, I don't want to sound like, too US centric in that view. Obviously, it's a global event, Jupiter Saturn conjunction. But I have wondered about that slight delay or difference between the geocentric conjunction versus the heliocentric conjunction. Do you have any thoughts about that before we go on to Uranus?
I mean, I think it is really worth considering, because this is this other facet to astrology. It doesn't, and as you know, I like to sort of step outside the box of horoscopic astrology as it is, just with synodic cycles and what have you. I feel like we have to have, like, our astrological cameras in every room. We have to be to astrology what China is to its populace. We have to be like spying on every single.
Okay, that was, didn't expect that.
Okay. three cameras for every person kind of thing. So yeah, I've seen that kind of thing proposed with heliocentric astrology before, and the times I have looked, I mean, it's an easy sort of click of the button on Solar Fire. I haven't done it in quite a long time, but I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, after all, like, ultimately that's the event. Like, everything we interpret geocentrically, we know it's a matter of of adopting a specific perspective. But there also is that really, really broad perspective where we, are actually sort of stepping outside our planet and looking at the solar system in its own right, and just sort of getting a sense of where everything actually is relative to itself.
To me, it gives you another data point regarding that interaction, especially when conjunctions, from the perspective on Earth, those conjunctions can sometimes happen multiple times due to retrogradation. And so I wonder if, we can use like the heliocentric conjunction, for example, as one sort of data point in that wave of that transit. So we know that these retrograde conjunctions, or these retrogradation events that happen on Earth, that's sort of how that heliocentric conjunction is sort of filtered down to our perspective. So I wouldn't necessarily see it as an either or proposition. I'd say, like, they are both true, and saying something about the same kind of event. I think there's a tendency to view, just because as above, so below, doesn't necessarily mean that one transit always just means one event. I think the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction obviously has a 20-year type of significance.
Yes.
As well as in this particular case, a 200-year kind of significance as well, because it's the beginning of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in the air signs, notwithstanding that little one in 1980, the sort of the false start of the age of air. But I mean, yeah, that's kind of the ironic thing about the age of Aquarius, right? Is that this is the real age of Aquarius, where we have this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, rather than vernal equinox shifting back in the constellation of Aquarius. But now I'm like going on to like 3 other topics. So let's get back to what you were saying.
Well, I'll get to the Jupiter Uranus in a second, but the only thing I wanted to say about Jupiter Saturn is the second Saturn return is also a Jupiter return. So for those of you who are in your 50s and sort of thinking, oh my God, I'm heading towards another Saturn return, what's it going to be this time? That second Saturn return, all things being equal, tends to be, it's not quite the trauma that the first one is, because the first Saturn return involves a Jupiter opposition to the natal position. That first Saturn return takes you out of your comfort zone, and you're suddenly, that feeling of turning 30, like, oh my God, I have no excuses anymore for anything I do. Every choice I make has to be made on the premise of being an experienced adult and not a experimental youth, but that second Saturn return, that includes a Jupiter return. There's this sort of like this feeling of finally becoming who you really are, who you really were all along. I think is a big part of that second Saturn return. I know it's still a
Wow.
ways off for you, Watson, but mark my words, it's coming. Mark my words. You might
Just
think,
about 4 years off for you, right?
yeah,
You're
yeah,
you're
yeah.
you're about to turn
I'm going to be
55.
55. I'm going to be
Wow.
55. So yeah, I'm about 4 years off from that event myself. First Saturn return wasn't so bad for me, although it was very much what I'm addressing in terms of having the Jupiter opposition, because I was off in New York studying astrology and sort of, cut off from the comfort zone of my
I would
my
feel like the
hometown.
pressure's on though, because your Saturn return was getting into astrology, and
Yeah.
this is the Saturn return of your time in astrology. So it will be like you got to put out your magnum opus, in time for that, so that you
Right.
can cap it off with, a
Yeah. Yeah.
testament to your work. Like
Yeah.
you kind of got to squeeze it in now. Like,
I guess so. I guess so. Yeah, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. Let's see. Sarah's saying, my mom's in her second. It's certainly a mixed bag. Lost her mom right before, taking care of her dad, dealing with my dad's mom, torturing them. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a pretty heavy duty. I mean, chances are that the horoscope shows, the Saturn and Jupiter are pretty tricky placements natally.
did we want to address the Jupiter Uranus conjunction?
Yeah, let's get to that because that was the original
Mhm.
question here. Now let's see. It's happening in Taurus. Do you have any immediate thoughts about it?
Well, yeah. We know from Richard Tarnas that the
Mm,
Jupiter Uranus conjunctions often coincide with great leaps forward in some domain, especially scientifically or technologically, which
mm,
makes sense if we think of Uranus as, you know, uh, the disruptor of status quos and signifier of, kind of explosive paradigm shifts. Then Jupiter, the planet of confirmation and validation, kind of gives a thumbs up or validation to whatever Uranus is whatever space Uranus is trying to innovate in. And so that makes me think that, one of the things we've seen with Uranus and Taurus is that there has been a lot of innovation and kind of insane or crazy stuff happening in the world of finance, the rise of decentralized finance or DeFi, um, NFTs, the popularization of crypto. We can't say that Uranus and Taurus is just crypto,
hmm
but I think that it certainly makes sense for kind of the democratization within the world of finance due to the apps like Robinhood,
hmm
which have like democratized the whole sort of process and ability to make money from the stock market. And so I think that Jupiter coming to Uranus in the spring of 2024 is going to be when we get like patents that will advance these ideas to an even sort of greater extent.
mm,
I've often noticed like the patents of these sort of incredible inventions seem to happen around these like Jupiter Uranus conjunctions. It's when lightning strikes, you get a eureka. Um,
right.
you hit a home run. It's some part of your life where there's a kind of whatever part of your chart that Taurus is in. I would think there would be a kind of sort of a lightning in a bottle type possibility or miraculous sort of
Yeah.
development in that part of life. And you only get one basically once every lifetime, right? I mean, it only happens in your chart. I mean, Jupiter Uranus conjunctions happen like 13 years apart or so.
Yeah. 14, I
But
think.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're only gonna get,
In
Jupiter
one, you
Uranus
mean in one sign,
in
you're
one
only going to get,
sign.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
you're only gonna
Yeah.
get it once in your life, basically, unless you
Yeah.
live to be older than 84. So I think that on a sort of broad level, I think we can expect the judicial confirmation or approval of uh like cryptocurrency and other sorts of innovative developments in finance. One of the big things that's happening right now is that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is suing Coinbase, a crypto exchange, and Binance, I believe, another one. And the central question is whether or not, as far as I can understand this issue, it's going to be decided by courts whether or not like cryptos are actual currencies or whether they are securities, and whether they're subject to the same kinds of regulation as other securities. And so I think the cryptos will actually win that. They'll win that battle, and probably by the spring of 2024, because Jupiter is like judges. It's a law, customs, right? So it's like judicial approval or confirmation of the Uranian development. It's like that's the thing that kind of gets blessed by Jupiter, and I think that means they'll be able to sort of continue to operate sort of more independently and less, not considered to be securities, and thus not subject to the same kinds of regulations as other sort of tradable assets like stocks and things like that. One other kind of interesting thing that's happening with Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus is we know that the federal government wants to move to this. I don't know if you've heard of this new like centralized payment system called FedNow, where I basically, in exchange for not having to deal with the hassle of doing your taxes anymore, because they'll be able to calculate everything automatically in your end, you'll have to have all of your transactions go through this centralized service. And this will probably be a big affront to institutionalized payment providers like PayPal and these third-party payment processes. And this is really interesting because this is kind of a callback to the 1930s when Jupiter was conjunct Uranus, and FDR bought everyone's gold and stored all the gold in Fort Knox, right? That was when that happened, was when Jupiter was conjunct Uranus and Taurus. And so I think there's a similar sort of possibility where we might see the I guess the literal repetition of that would be like the government buying up people's crypto in order to sort of get it off the markets, to sort of take more control over it in the same way that they did with gold. But in any case, I think that would probably mean like the price of these things would go up, if Jupiter's expanding them. Anyway, I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, no. To my knowledge, the first Jupiter-Uranus conjunction of Roosevelt's presidency was in 1941 in Taurus. I mean, that's the thing. So I don't see how he could have. I don't see how there could have been because to my knowledge, the Fort Knox thing he did like in his first term, if I remember correctly, which was
am I wrong about that?
33 to 37. Let's double check that, but I'd like to be sure about that.
Yeah, I thought the Fort Knox thing was.
Was it Hoover who did it instead of Roosevelt?
I don't know. One sec.
Yeah, let's get on top of that. But
okay.
I don't think.
Sorry for misleading you.
You might be right. I just want to know the specifics of that, because I associate Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus with 1941 during this brief sort of the period where it really sort of builds up to the period where the U.S. and the Soviet Union find themselves in an alliance, despite their sort of hostility, because Germany invades the Soviet Union. There'd been a treaty, a pact between Stalin and Hitler that they would leave each other alone. Stalin found out, Hitler couldn't be trusted, go figure. And the Nazis invade Soviet Union. And although Pearl Harbor is still sort of 6 months away, it's still sort of a matter of like the U.S. is already starting to do its Lend-Lease thing with Great Britain. And when Soviet Union gets into the war, the U.S. is doing its Lend-Lease thing with the Soviet Union as well, sending over, tanks and munitions and things. So there is a sort of like, you can get these sort of things, unexpected alliances due to sort of, circumstances that sort of explode in people's faces that they don't anticipate. So yeah, two people who are sort of, or in this case, two nations that were hostile to each other largely, although they weren't as hostile in the 30s as they had been, say, in the 20s, and certainly not as much as they would be after the war. but still that sudden coming together. And there are a lot of sort of risings. This period in 1941, when Jupiter and Uranus were conjunct, was this is when Italy invades Greece and the Balkans, and they find they're suddenly up against a sort of a really strong resistance that they don't expect. If any of that sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And just in, historically, I think of, like the storming of the Bastille was Jupiter Uranus. The Nat Turner uprising in Virginia, where a bunch of slaves, sort of one of the largest and most consequential slave uprisings, that's a Jupiter Uranus event where just like out of nowhere, this mass sort of explosion comes and makes an impact, even if it's just a sort of spark that explodes and disappears, it leaves this sort of lasting impression. Yeah. And the American Bill of Rights, Madison signed the Bill of Rights, I believe, or introduced the Bill of Rights, the American Bill of Rights, I think of being the sort of the Jupiter Uranus element of the American political project. It's not the Constitution, it's the Bill of Rights. That's Jupiter Uranus. So like sort of the more idealistic, the more aspirational elements of the project are found in there as well.
Okay, so just to circle back to what I
Yes.
was remembering. So yeah, for this plan did happen earlier in his presidency. This is right when Uranus was entering Taurus. When Jupiter came to conjoin Uranus in 1941, this is when the gold reserves in Fort Knox reached their peak. 1941 was when the greatest transfers of this gold went to Fort Knox. And there was a basically 1941 stands out as the, what I'm sort of reading here is this was the peak of the gold reserves at Fort Knox was 1941. So there does seem to be this correspondence with it fits into the story of Uranus going through Taurus, and then Jupiter and conjoining Uranus and Taurus was just like the kind of maximal point of that process, rather than being when it was initiated.
Right.
I think I was mixing together the some of the storyline from the Uranus and Taurus period of the 1930s with just the
you were conflating it, but it's still relevant.
It's right.
And it's and the fact that sort of the peak in collecting all the gold that coincides with this time when the U.S. is literally giving its weapons, well, not quite giving them away, but trading them at under duress, let's say, under someone else's duress, in this case, Great Britain and then the Soviet Union. I mean, imagine, like 2 Uranus cycles previously, the United States, that's an interesting Freudian slip. The United States have been fighting a war with Great Britain for independence, and then 2 Uranus cycles later, and they're actually sending them weapons to help them save themselves from the German invasion. So there's this, so you have at once like the sort of the amassing of all this gold, sort of hoarding. I mean, how Taurus is that, hoarding gold, but then conversely, sort of, out of driven ideologically, the U.S. doesn't sort of do lend-lease for Great Britain and Soviet Union because they think they can make profit off it. They do make some deals. They like take all of Britain's bases in the Caribbean, I think, and things like that. Or they take some naval bases and things like that. But still, like quite a lot of support, ideologically driven support on the part of the U.S. to stave off Nazi invasions there. So there's something to all that. I also find it interesting. I'm going to share this. Well, I didn't have the chart for the Gold Knox thing. One thing I do have a chart for that sort of ties into the next chapter of all that is Nixon's taken the US dollar off the gold standard, for which I have a specific chart for when this was announced. In August of 71, a day after my 3rd birthday. And it's interesting that it's, in this case, it's Jupiter-Neptune, but in a position that reminds us of that period in 1941 when Jupiter and Uranus were conjunct, sort of like opposite over here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Saturn return of that period in 41 that you're talking about.
Right.
Close to it. Close to it.
Yeah. The Lilac Tree said in the chat, I came in late. Is the SEC decision based on the astrology of cryptocurrency or Coinbase, etc., or a personal opinion based on your understanding of finance in the market? The personal opinion was my understanding of the dispute. The SEC is suing these exchanges, and the question is whether or not a cryptocurrency is considered a security. My astrological opinion is that the crypto exchanges will probably come out on top, because if we can correlate Uranus and Taurus with innovations in finance, then Jupiter's conjunction to Uranus in the spring of 2024 would be about the judicial approval or confirmation of those innovations. So that's why that's what I hope that answers that question. I've been looking at that Jupiter Uranus conjunction for a while on my site. A few years ago, actually, I wrote about how this Jupiter Uranus conjunction is happening on Zuckerberg's sun, and Zuckerberg has previously tried to establish a cryptocurrency. He wanted to create a cryptocurrency that was based on the value.
Facebucks.
Yeah, global coin. It was supposed Libra, I think it was called. It was going to
He
be
couldn't decide on a name. Boom, boom.
yeah. It was going to be. It was supposed to be like an average kind of the world's biggest currencies. It fell through, but I think that with Jupiter Uranus conjoining while it's really close to Mark Zuckerberg's sun, I wonder if he'll like take another crack at that in the spring of 2024, and he'll have some sort of remarkable success with that, as that conjunction happens on his sun. So
Right.
I mean, I kind of have my eye on a few, big celebrities who have their suns around that degree, because I would expect
Who
to
else?
sort of thank you for asking that. Let me see who I knew there was all right. For example, I know that like Adele's sun is close to that degree, and she was already born with a sun conjunct Jupiter and Taurus. So I was kind of thinking like, in what way is she going to go rogue? I think that's probably the best way to think about Uranus conjoining the sun, is that it's a time when someone is maybe more likely to go rogue in their own life.
Go rogue because some of those other examples I cited. I mean, the storming
You
of
were
the
going to write a
Bastille.
whole book on Uranus conjunct the sun, right?
Well, yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, I could, and maybe I should. Yeah, but the storming of the Bastille, and even before that, like everything that set up the French Revolution under that Jupiter Uranus. That's absolutely like, the population going rogue, the Nat Turner rebellion uprising. I mean, that's certainly people going rogue. No one expects that. So yeah, sort of the people sort of spontaneously or seemingly spontaneously rising up and sort of getting involved is
yeah.
is
I
what
love
is
the
what
Nat
you kind of
Turner
expect.
story. I love the Nat Turner story because it
It's kind of
because it involves the
astrological.
eclipse. Yeah, it involves the eclipse. I love those stories where from history where like the actual inciting event was a celestial event.
Was that, yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, he sees this eclipse and he takes it as a sign to start the
take
uprising. Yeah.
action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any others you can think of off the top of your head where an eclipse or some other kind of celestial phenomenon is actually like part
Oh,
of the story?
oh, geez. I know I do have one, but it's not occurring to me right now. It'll maybe pop up in my head while we're talking about something else.
It's really funny when you look on Wikipedia and you're looking for like what happens in a given year in like say science or technology or music or what have you. It's quite interesting when you're looking at specifically when you're looking at the science events within a given year on Wikipedia, because it will list the astronomical events as well. So it'll list like all the different like discoveries that were happening in that year, and it will also include the date of a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse when it happens. And so it's just kind of a funny thing. Obviously they don't intend on doing this, but you can see what events happen really close to a solar eclipse, and some of those events are really kind of striking. Like, for example, there was the solar eclipse that proved that Einstein was
Yes. Yeah.
correct about
Yeah. About
the way that light
the
acts.
yeah. Yeah. In 1919, the expedition. Yeah.
Um,
That
which I imagine that must have been big in his chart then, you know,
Yeah,
the
yeah, and
eclipse
literally,
itself proves him right.
yeah, and literally the next morning he wakes up and he's a celebrity. Like it's a real like that's the day that he goes from being utterly nobody to suddenly he's on every
Somebody,
front page of every newspaper and all that. Yeah,
the new Newton, yeah,
exactly. I mean, yeah, and there had never been a new Newton since Newton. So yeah,
right, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that is a good one. Actually, that's a really obvious one to point out that that's hugely consequential and has everything to do with the eclipse.
Um,
Jude Roscoe's asking, Nick, what happened when Uranus was conjunct my moon? That was in 2018, and that was a very interesting year. I started it by getting married. My wedding was in January of 2018 in Cape Town, South Africa. That was when Uranus was on my Saturn in Aries, and Saturn rules my seventh. And I was getting married on the other side of the planet. My parents were there, and I had one friend from Montreal visiting, and a couple of astrologer friends from the States were there. But mostly it was my wife's friends and family in South Africa. Obviously, most people can afford to fly over. Watson, you were invited, but I understood. You and
right.
Beth couldn't make it.
We sent you a quilt.
You sent us a very beautiful quilt, which I still treasure to this day. Um, but now I married my wife because I love her, of course. But it was also, living in South Africa, I had to leave every 6 months. I'd been there since 2016, and I'd had to leave every 6 months to renew my visitor's visa, which could get really expensive. And 2018, because getting married to Anna started the process whereby I could apply for a spousal visa. But 2018 was this weird year where, like, okay, the application was made, but the paperwork still had to take time. So we had these weird sort of trips where I would have to leave South Africa for a little while and sort of hang around an area waiting for the chance to come back, like for lawyers to argue for me to come back. And this happened a couple of times. First on the honeymoon, we went to India. And we were in Kerala, India, which is sort of the southwestern part of India. And we had a beautiful honeymoon, 3 weeks in India. But then Anna had to leave and go back to South Africa. But I had to wait in order for my visa to be cleared. And I hung around this beach town in India for, God, like 2-3 weeks extra, just on my own, just bumming around the beach. I'm, still doing astrology consultations. I think I did a workshop for Adam Ellenbass at the time and stuff like that. But, all while like living in this little beach house in southern India, like really close to the ferry to Sri Lanka.
So it's almost like the moon rules your 12th house of like
right.
isolation, being stranded, kind of.
And then later that year, the same thing happened. And I had to leave the country for a bit to renew my visa. And Anna and I went to Zanzibar, which is this beautiful island off Tanzania. In the Indian Ocean. And, and I think Anna stayed with me there for a week. And then Freddie Mercury was born. We were staying in a hotel that's just across the street from where Freddie Mercury was born.
Wow.
And then, after a week, Anna had to go home and, to her work and everything. And I got to bum around Zanzibar that was again, like 2 weeks. So, I mean, it's all a blur, but, and it was really ironic because in both cases, like, because my stay was indefinite, I couldn't go, like in India, I could have taken a ferry to Sri Lanka, and in Zanzibar, I could have taken a ferry to Dar es Salaam. Like I could have kept like traveling, but the thing was, in both cases, it was really indefinite. I could have wound up being there for months for all we knew. So I had to be really, judicious with my funds, and I, just live off the bare minimum. So I was in these really sort of exotic, beautiful places, but I had to like sort of live really frugally at the same time. And yeah, my moon is in the 10th house, but I do see my Taurus moon in the 10th house. I mean, I've had to live a lot of my adult life sort of like outside the comfort of my hometown.
Nomadically.
Yeah, and not necessarily by choice. I mean, I've got a Taurus moon. I have the kind of personality where, like, if Montreal had just been a sort of functional, sane place, I probably just would have stayed there. I'm totally the kind of personality who would be born, grow up, and die in the same sort of city. Like, that's my sort of comfort zone.
Although
But
it's so interesting this involved your wife, though, because the ruler of your seventh is in the ninth.
yeah,
So,
oh yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah,
encounter
and I
the
and I
marriage
want
partner in a foreign
yeah.
place. And
Really, I was living in Vancouver when I met Anna, and she was in Cape Town. So there are no two cities on planet Earth that are further apart, I think, than Vancouver and Cape Town. So it's really like the opposite end of the globe. Yeah, no, very much. I mean, my Saturn in the ninth house has been a really dominant feature of most of my life. I've considered most of my adult life I've just been in exile. Really, I don't think of myself as a immigrant or refugee. There are elements of all those, but more than anything, I've always thought of myself as an exile. Even here in Vancouver, I'm in my home country, but I'm nowhere near Montreal, and I still think of myself as an exile. So yeah, that's like Saturn in the ninth in Aries and all that stuff, and all that Uranus stuff in the Taurus moon. I mean, ultimately, I did get a South African spousal visa, and now I can stay for longer periods of time, although it's coming up for renewal. And who knows, I might have some other stranded beach I'm gonna have to stay on. Once again, we shall see. Anyway, that's my little story.
That's really funny. And Uranus would have been on your midheaven at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of I imagine all this sort of chaos in your living situation would have
Well, I think the
been
most
an interruption of your work in some ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, one direct thing of all that was I wound up pulling out of UAC that year. I was booked to speak at UAC, and just the wedding and all the other sort of things that we had to attend to. I mean, these stupid trips that I had to take just to reset my visa. UAC was just going to be too expensive. I wouldn't have made a dime, and actually, I think I was in Zanzibar when UAC was happening. So when I was disappointing whoever wanted to see me there, and sort of missing my friends and all that, I was chilling on a beach in Zanzibar.
Not everyone knows this, but Nick's moon is opposite of my moon, like to the degree, and then Nick's moon is conjunct his MC, and my moon is conjunct my IC on the other end of the angle.
We are polar moons.
So at the same time you had Uranus conjunct your moon, I had Uranus opposing my moon and opposing my my IC. Not that anyone asked, but the biggest thing that happened to me when Uranus hit my midheaven is that was when I was able to take kind of this leap of faith in leaving a full-time job. You have to understand, like, for me, it was not an easy thing to become an astrologer. I resisted it for a very long time because I didn't know if I could even do it. And I also had a lot of feelings of like I would have to be crazy to do something like astrology. And so it took a lot. It took a lot. And also at that time I had 3 children and a wife, and I was responsible for them. And so I felt a great pressure to, stay with my, full-time job as a teacher. I eventually became sort of unfulfilled in that over my Saturn return. And I switched to teaching at this art school, which was more, because I'm a music teacher, and I thought that might be more creatively sort of challenging, being able to sort of work with music at a higher level. But I was only able to work at this place part-time. So I was doing like part-time astrology, part-time teaching. And so the Uranus transit of my midheaven, in fact, it really kicked into high gear when Venus went retrograde in Scorpio over my moon. That Venus retrograde in Scorpio in 2018 was when I basically had something approximating an existential sort of crisis, and I realized I could not continue with teaching like even one more day. And so I really launched into doing astrology full time after that. And that was really my Uranus transit to my AMC was taking this kind of step off the edge into doing this full time. And luckily it turned out okay.
The world is a better place because you made that choice,
Well, thanks. I think, yeah. Are you saying I was a bad teacher or a good astrologer?
Both.
Yeah. Yeah, teaching is super hard and requires some very specific skills. Because I thought that like I would be a good music teacher because I knew a lot about music and I knew how to do music, but it turns out you actually need like to know a lot more than your subject. You need to know about human psychology and like how to persuade people and how to lead people and how to organize people, and uh definitely deficient in those areas. I'm
Oh well, so
cranked up on charm and nothing in the leading
nothing in
department.
the leading
So
department.
yeah, so I had to but you have to remember though, for me, Saturn is in my 5th house, so that's kind of the big area of my life that's been very challenged, both like with dealing with difficult children or troubled children, and with the creative arts in general, feeling like there's just too high of a bar I have to clear to make it worth my time, or to be to do it well enough, to be worthy, of my own kind of creations. My albums are gonna stay, unheard unless I can get over that at some point. So I don't know. Maybe that's a second
Let's
Saturn
get you
return
on. Let's
story.
get you on Bandcamp.
Yeah, I'll release my albums anonymously. That's
Yeah,
probably
well,
how
there's
I do it.
already a dude named Patrick Watson out
Yeah,
there making
right. So I
music.
kind
Yeah,
of have
from
to.
my
Yeah,
hometown of all
yeah,
places. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
right. So I kind of have to do
you
it
should call
anonymously.
yourself the other Patrick Watson.
Right.
Someone's asking what happened when Uranus was conjunct your moon. Well, that would have happened in the 70s when your
Yeah, that
parents were
was in the
still in high
70s.
school or
Yeah,
whatever.
I was a mere glint in the milkman's eye
Yeah.
at that point. No, Uranus isn't conjoined my moon. It was just when it was opposite. Anyway, that was my little personal story. Do you want to look at a chart in 3D, Nick?
Oh, yes. Let's do this. Let's look at a chart in
Okay,
3D.
so let's see if I can figure this out.
Watson's been playing with VR,
So I think
AI,
what I'm gonna
VR,
do.
LSD,
So
MDMA.
here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to share my screen, and then okay, let me make sure I got this right before I do. Okay, so this is a little bit of an experiment. Okay, so share. So now you should be able to see this screen. Do you see it?
Yep.
Okay, so now I'm putting the headset on, and
Okay, so far we just see you with a headset on.
yeah, well, you should be able to see me on a.
I see your browser. No, I see your browser.
Oh, you see your browser. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right, because you can actually see my.
Yeah, your screen. It
camera
says so.
too.
Start casting to this private link from your headset.
Gotcha. All right, so.
Get ready, folks.
Here we
Patrick
go.
Watson is about to
Cast.
take us into the new dimension of astrology.
Well, I actually showed a little video of myself looking at my own like chart in 3D a few months ago, but
go
here we
boldly.
go. So, all right, do you see anything?
Yeah. We're in. We're in.
All right, we're in. Okay, I don't know how clear this is to you. It might be a little fuzzy,
I can
depending. So we have this option in this astronomy program called Star Chart. So you can see I'm looking all around here.
Is a view of the solar system we are familiar with from children's educational books and science posters.
And of course, I have a British accent because I'm the only one who sounds like an authority.
All right. So
if I was from the Bronx, it'd be like, yeah, so this is the solar system. What are you gonna do about it?
All right. So I think where's the. Whoops.
That's so cool.
I think all right, I forget how to change the date. I just got this set up. So I think I have to. Where is. Where's there should be like a
This launch this premiere is very Elon Musk-esque.
Right. Yeah, I won't be doing any billionaire
The
dances
orrery
today.
is a view of
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Cue Rolling Stones.
Where is there's like a oh, is it this? Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
So you can see here we're on June 19th, 2023.
Yep.
We can zoom out here so we can actually get a look at the sky here. Sort of in a, like we're looking at a chart or something. And where do you want to go? Do you want to see what happens in July?
Sure.
Obviously, we don't have any sign boundaries here, so we don't exactly know what signs we're looking at, except for from our memories. So we know Saturn is in Pisces right now. The Sun will be in Cancer at that point, or actually, July 24th, it might be in Leo.
Yeah, it'll be in Leo. But of course, that's just from the Earth perspective. I'm curious.
Right.
You can see Venus if you zoom in. You can see that Venus is getting close to Earth, which of course accounts for the retrograde.
Whoops. Yeah, that's Venus here.
Yeah, hiding behind the sun there.
Here, maybe I can.
Can you turn us around so we see it from that perspective?
Yes, I can. Oh, that's Mercury. Sorry if this is giving anyone.
Oh, it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I tried VR once, like in 2015. I flew a rocket ship around the solar system, and it was pretty cool. But I haven't.
Yeah. So you can see this right here is Earth. This is Venus. This is the Sun. So when we get to late July, we're going to see that Venus is actually going to pass in
between. Yeah, there we go. And that's why we think Venus is retrograde. That's why it looks retrograde to us, because it's passing between us, and so it just appears to be going backward.
And in fact, on August 12th, you can see that the Moon will be conjunct Venus retrograde, conjunct the Sun. So you can see how that alignment is reflected here.
Indeed.
So that's kind of what it looks like. I mean, I don't know that anyone's made like an astrology-based VR app yet.
No, I know Chris has looked into it. I did an astrology talk in Second Life in 2006. Were you around for that? Do you remember
I did.
doing that?
It was just so difficult to use though, because my laptop was so slow.
Oh, okay. No, it was pretty decent. I had a slideshow. I did a whole astrology talk. I wish I had a video of that still. Chris and I were opining that we didn't have the foresight to document those experiments.
Right.
But all right. So this is pretty cool. So this is, this isn't looking at a geocentric horoscopic chart, but it certainly is fun to sort of just look around the solar system in that way.
Yeah. No.
Now you're in some kind of lounge.
Yeah, I'm in this lounge. I'm just trying to decide.
Hanging out in the mountains.
Because there's some other features in this app as well.
Such
as I'll show you when we get there. I'm trying to remember what else there are. I mean, that's probably the most sort of astrologically relevant one. You have like a sky view where you can see how things look from Earth.
Oh, well, that's rather astrologically relevant, I'd say.
Right. Yeah. So
maybe even more so.
So you can see, actually, this is synced with my own position with where I am right now, because I know it's
right.
So this is pretty cool. Let me see if there's a way you can change the date. Whoops. Maybe not.
So it's just the real time.
Browse planets. Oh, Okay, we're going to the sun. Traveling to the sun. All right, yeah. Anyway, so this is pretty cool. It's not quite where we need it to be.
It
Yet for our
burns.
purposes.
We're Icarus.
Yeah, this is a Sunday for sure. All right. Well, anyway, I hope I'm not boring everyone. So I will X out of this. But
okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's like to look at your chart in 3D, at least what we have right now. So I think I can get out of this now by.
Yeah, I've taken your share out.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. So you've just been looking at me on the headset.
Yeah. Aligning light astrology, dropping the F-bomb in the chat. All right. It's
almost sweaty. It's quite hot in this room, actually. Oh, there we go.
Cool. All right. Well, people seem to have enjoyed that. It's always interesting to see how that's, that technology's coming along. We do have a headset somewhere in our house in South Africa, and we've barely touched it, but should be fun to get it out at some point.
Yeah. It's funny because I know I kind of got the impression that people think the VR sets from like Meta or Facebook are like lame. Sorry for using this ableist language. I mean, like not good. But it seems like there's been a lot more excitement about Apple's like new headset, the one that's like $3,500. And I think that the Meta, I like the Meta VR. I think it is pretty good. I think it has a lot of potential, and as you can see, it's maybe it's got a ways to go before it's sort of more useful for astrologers. But I mean, you could, in theory, use it to give a demonstration on transits, like I just did, to actually sort of show that three-dimensional, heliocentric view of what's going on when there's a Venus retrograde, for example.
Yeah, no, I think certainly some kind of astronomy software is really, really useful, and I would say vital for serious astrologers. You don't just want to be looking at a pie chart. You want the pie chart's great. It does what it does, but you want a real sense of what the sky looks like. Even if you are someone who spends most of your time indoors, it's very useful. I've been using Starry Night for a long, long time. It's the full version is expensive, like maybe $350, I think. But I certainly don't regret
cheaper than Solarfire.
Cheaper than Solarfire, and
by like $10.
Right, but it's if you're getting into it, it's the kind of software serious astronomers use Starry Night, and they can hook it up to their telescopes. That's something that we were meaning to do at some point, but I've never gotten around to that element. But just to use it to sort of track the sky, look at the sky, teach yourself advanced astronomy, or even just like have a visual sense of the geocentric perspective that we use in astrology. I think it's really, really vital.
Yeah, I use Stellarium, which is just open source. They have like a mobile version, or a web version rather, and a downloadable version. I get a lot of what I need out of that, or I still find it kind of fiddly to use.
There's also Solar System Scope is free.
Oh yeah, I love that too.
Yeah, Solar System Scope I love. But it doesn't do some of the things that Starry Night does better. So I like having both. But yes, if you're looking for something affordable, I certainly recommend Solar System Scope. And yeah, Stellarium's good too.
Oh, and the program I was just using, Star Chart, on the VR, that was only $10.
Okay, yeah,
I mean,
and it's decent. It's
yeah, I mean the headset is a bit expensive, but you can play. It's good. It's good for other things. I like to play Beat Saber on there occasionally.
Okay,
that's kind of fun. It's like a rhythm game where you have these lightsabers and you chop up the beats as they're coming towards you with some songs playing.
Oh, okay. So by the title, I thought it was another reference to what that guy in You is doing. But
anyway. No. Yeah, you use the VR.
Never mind. I didn't just make that stupid joke. Sorry,
insert here. Yeah.
Crush Dorcas is asking about the supernova. What about the supernova?
Oh, are they talking about Betelgeuse?
Beetle,
Is like exploding?
Beetlejuice about to blow up. I've seen the headline. I haven't read the story.
Yeah, basically Betelgeuse, I'm just gonna call it Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice. I call it Beetlejuice.
Yeah, Beetlejuice is getting really, really bright in the sky because it's about to explode. So that's basically the extent of the story. I haven't,
right, which probably means it exploded like millions of years ago, but we're only about to see it.
Yeah, like it will be very, very soon. Although interestingly, Michael Keaton did reemerge as Batman recently.
It's true.
So I mean,
damn it! And I said the Beetlejuice thing.
Michael Keaton is having a Michael Keaton-essence. Well, actually, the Keaton-essence has been going on for a while now, for a few years. He's kind of come back as a
he was Vulture in Spider-Man, and he was fantastic.
Yeah. I liked him in that. I thought he was really good. It kind of reminded me, like, oh yeah, Michael Keaton is like, he was always good. He just
always good.
Disappeared for a bit.
I remember I saw him in his very first movie when it came out, not very well known movie called Night Moves, co-starring the Fonz.
Oh, I haven't seen it. No.
Yeah, it was in the early '80s. I think it's Keaton's first movie. I'm pretty sure it is, but he was a total unknown, but he's just hilarious in that movie. It's kind of a, it's funny.
Well, Beetlejuice 2 is coming out next year, Kai reminds us.
Oh, good grief.
Oh, and that will have Jenna Ortega, who we mentioned today. She's kind of like this new generation's Winona Ryder.
Right.
That's kind of the impression I get from her.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Winona in Heathers was, that sort of set up. That's like a movie of a generation.
Right. I did quite enjoy the Wednesday Addams spinoff Netflix show. I did think that was pretty fun. I mean, my kids liked it. It was a fun thing to watch with my my tween.
Okay.
And she's a big Jenna Ortega fan.
And Winona Ryder was in Mermaids with Christina Ricci. That was Christina Ricci's first movie, and Christina Ricci, of course, played Wednesday Addams before. So we're doing the whole. I don't know where Kevin Bacon fits into all of this, but all right. Well,
oh my God, I bet you would be excellent to play the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon with. I bet you'd be like really good at that.
Yeah, I've never played it, and I find it intimidating. I might do better than I might surprise myself. I think I could get lucky or unlucky, I think, depending on where the game went.
Hell, I think you could probably play that game with, like, prime ministers or heads of state.
Oh yeah, because they know a lot about movie trivia. That's how they get there.
Oh no, I mean, like, well, just because
Vladimir Putin has lost Kevin Bacon game to Nick Dagan best. Must pull out of Ukraine now.
You have a lot of good. I mean, your trivia knowledge is impressive, and isn't that? I mean, wasn't your kind of depth and breadth of trivia knowledge kind of one of your unanticipated strengths as you came into astrology?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was just I knew a lot of calendar dates. I was the kind of, like, long before the internet, I was the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday, which I guarantee you, before social media, was not an easy thing for a lot of people to do. But yeah, that was what helped me sort of get astrology, if you will, because I already had all that information in the back of my mind. They abducted Kevin Bacon, The Last Guardians of the Galaxy Xmas special. Okay, we're veering far off from astrology.
Right. Oh, Michael Keaton is Venus retrograde in
Virgo. Yeah, I knew that.
Huh.
Yeah, he does. I guess I may as well pull up the Michael Keaton file, since we're. I don't think
talking about Beetlejuice.
Yeah, and Batman and all that stuff.
He's been many birdmen or flying mammalian creatures.
Right. Yeah, I don't have it's just 22 charts here. I mean, I don't think I've touched this thing in years, but indeed, we don't have a time of birth, but he's born 5th of September 1951. He does have that Mercury Venus retrograde with the South Node.
So night shift was Oh no, sorry. Mr. Mom was Venus retrograde.
Mr. Mom was Venus retrograde, and that is a very Venus retrograde movie.
It is, yeah.
And lo and behold, it comes out not long before he turns 32 with that Venus Mars return. And yeah, this is kind of when he becomes a star. Like Night Moves didn't make him a star, but Mr. Mom is kind of on its way. And then, of course, I mean, Beetlejuice and Batman are what make him star. But
right.
Yeah, so his Scorpio moon might be in Libra with the Saturn-Pluto transit that he was having at the time. But yeah, Mr. Mom would have come out not long before his 32nd birthday, about a month and a half before, with the Venus and Mars return. And the movie was released 11 days before Venus went retrograde in Virgo. Good eye there. Good eye.
What about when was Batman Returns released? Would that have been the next Venus retrograde?
No, that's in June of 92.
So maybe the filming of it or something. I wonder. Oh, I was just
Let
trying
me
to think
see
like
here.
what would have been 91 for Keaton.
Yeah, it's possible it was filmed during then. Let me go back to the share screen for a second. Batman Returns came out in June of 92. I sometimes have filming dates in these, but no, this one doesn't. But it's entirely possible it was filmed at the next one. All things being equal. Mind you, that the first Batman came out in June of 89. It was probably filmed the previous summer when Venus was retrograde in Gemini.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually, that's kind of interesting that Keaton has Venus retrograde in Virgo, given that Tim Burton, I believe, has Virgo rising with Uranus and Pluto in the first house in Virgo. So I wonder if, I don't know. I'm just putting a few things together now.
Yeah, Tim Burton would do. Yeah, he's Gemini rising. He's Virgo Sun Pluto, and Michael Keaton's Venus and Mercury are right on his Sun.
I'm
Pluto.
so sorry. My memory is completely shot today, I guess.
But this is a really that's an interesting tangent,
because that was also Tim Burton's biggest movie at that point. There was certainly, Batman, the 1989 Batman. That really, you could almost look to that as like the first like major superhero movie, before there was like a Marvel Cinematic Universe or anything like that.
Yeah, I would go with Christopher Reeve's Superman 10 years earlier, but there was virtually nothing in between. You're right. I mean, in that sense. The thing is, Christopher, like I was 10 years old when Christopher Reeve's Superman came out, but you weren't even born yet, so it doesn't seem like an event to you.
Oh, true. No, I forgot about Christopher Reeve movies. Yeah.
That was a big deal. Ask 10-year-old me in 1978 what the greatest movie ever is, and I will definitely tell you.
Well, gosh, that score though, the John Williams theme is just wonderful. Kai says Wikipedia says filming began September 3rd, 1991 for Batman Returns. That puts it
there you go,
in
solidly in the Venus retrograde in the Red 5. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rev Kai. Yep. And
and that film does end up kind of containing some Venus retrograde themes, I guess.
Yeah, not as much as that
between Catwoman and Batman.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, not as Venus retrograde as maybe the nipples on George Clooney's uniform, but
yeah. Well, that was God. The nipples. Was that 97?
I'm looking it up here.
God, that it's unfortunate.
Yeah, June 20th, 1997. So it might have been filmed during the Venus retrograde of 96. Probably was.
It's a shame because George Clooney, I think, makes a really good. He makes a good Bruce Wayne and a terrible Batman. I think it's difficult for the actor to do both well.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I confess I never even saw his Batman movie. I just, I've seen so many clips. So
right. I mean, I was like 9 years old at the time, so I was pretty psyched to see it. But then we got there and it was nipples. So
Jade is asking if we've read Alex Trenoweth's Mirror Mirror, Famous People and the actors who played them. Funny. Yes, I have. And Alex is one of the few astrologers who did make it to my wedding. Alex was at my wedding, and she's a good friend, and I have read her book. And it's actually, this is part of how Alex and I became friends when we first became friends actually in South Africa at the Astrology conference when I first went there. And we became friends because we're both interested in those kinds of subjects. And her book is a really wonderful exploration of actors who portray real life characters, and the combination, the contrast, the synastry between the actor and the figure they're portraying. In fact, the very first astrology article I ever wrote in November of 2000, the same month that George W. Bush and
the Mercury retrograde,
the election, what's his name, Al Gore. In November 2000, my first paid astrology writing gig. Rick Levine and Jeff Jower had to start a website. It's the site still exists, stariq.com. But this is like the .com bubble before it burst. They had, funding. They had investors to run this commercial website. And so they were hiring writers to write sort of, sort of pop astrology, but good pop astrology articles. And my very first article was called Frida Hayek and Salma Hayek and Frida Kahlo. Excuse me, Frida Kayak. No, Rida is on a kayak. No. Salma Hayek and Frida Kahlo, Saturn in Pisces or Peas in a Pod. And it was a whole article about how Salma Hayek and who played Frida Kahlo, how they both had Saturn in Pisces. I wrote this article before the movie came out. Before it was even filmed. It was just it was announced that they were going to do it, and so it was just an exploration of this actor and the real life character that she was portraying, and the fact that as we know, Salma Hayek, that this was a very sort of personal project for her that she fought to get done for a long time. The dark side of all that I didn't know and didn't come out in the article, of course. And much later we found out that there was some Harvey Weinstein shenanigans involved in making that movie. But it's a beautiful movie, despite his interference. And I'm very proud that was the first article I wrote. And so when Alex and I became friends, she was working on that book, and I was interested in the same kinds of studies, and it's I do recommend it. I haven't seen the Oppenheimer movie yet. Oh, it hasn't come out yet. Right. Yeah. Okay. That's the very good reason not to see a movie, is if it hasn't come out yet. But I do have the book it's based on, which is like one of the next books I'm going to read, definitely before the movie comes out. I'm very interested in Oppenheimer. Obviously, sort of the nuclear bomb has resurfaced in our consciousness lately because of everything going on. The exact Mars-Saturn opposition transit. Yeah, Pixie, I'd say you're archetypally, it's on the nose, is well put. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Apparently Christopher Nolan is really going to town on this, as I understand.
I mean, that's what he does. He
goes to town.
He's one of a long line of Sun and Leo movie directors, with big bold visions. And,
right. Kubrick, Hitchcock, Polanski,
some of the best, really.
Yeah. We know how to be dictators. I was an aspiring film director once upon a time.
M. Night Shyamalan,
is he a Leo? Okay.
Yeah, he is. But
I don't really feel comfortable using his name.
I know. Half the time he's really good, and then the other half it's like, what? But he does happen to have the Sun of Leo. But what's kind of interesting with the Oppenheimer movie is how people have been on Twitter have been talking about how the Barbie movie is coming out on the same day. And so we have these like two very different films going up against each other, and like people sort of speculating about which one will win out. Because in theory, you'd think Oppenheimer should win out, but then again, this Barbie movie seems hilarious. Even just the trailer of this Barbie movie is just really pretty funny.
I haven't seen the trailer yet. I
Yeah.
What's funny to me is that this is sort of like, Oppenheimer was a man of the 40s, right?
Right.
He helped develop he sort of oversaw the development of the atomic bomb. And by 1953, he's persona non grata. He's sort of demoted he has his security clearance taken away in the sort of McCarthy communist witch hunt fervor. And then the Barbie, I have the chart. Barbie comes out, I think, in March of 1959. And it's sort of like it's a part of that world that overshadowed the gravitas of the
So
of the
really,
nuclear
Robert
bomb.
Oppenheimer's like true nemesis was Barbie, is what you're saying. Like
No, no,
even in death.
Culturally,
Yeah.
there's something, Barbie is about this sort of, post-war, I mean, it was a boomer toy, baby boomer toy kind of thing, I don't. The movie seems to be like quirky and probably
Wait
a
a
lot more
sec.
fun than I imagined.
1959. Would that be Venus retrograde in
No, I knew
Virgo
you were
to
going to
Leo?
say that. I think it's in March of
Yes.
59. I
Oh,
think it's good. I thought you might bring that up, but no, it's not Venus retrograde. I'm pretty sure I have the chart for Barbie's release here. You want to look at Barbie?
It's happening red. Well, it's all happening in red 3. I mean, red
5.
5
Yeah,
is what we're in right now. So
yeah, I think, but Barbie, I'm pretty sure. Let me see here. I'm looking at my file.
it might be just prior to red 5 then.
Yeah, and a black one. Barbie doll, March 9th, 1959. Yeah. Yeah. So it was released in stores. Here, I'll put it up. You want to look at Barbie's chart? We could. I was going to put.
Sure,
I was going to put.
I don't care.
I was going to put up Oppenheimer, but
now we're looking at Barbie.
We'll call this episode "Nick and Patrick Play with Barbie." Okay, there we are. This is Barbie, and you can see here. Yeah, it's still 154 days before Venus went retrograde, so it's still a few months. But that summer would have been, the sort of the first summer that little girls and probably some little boys were playing with their Barbie dolls. And oh yeah, this is from an article written by Valerie Vaughn, really great astrologer, who I knew back in the day. I met her the same time that I met Bruce Schofield. Oppenheimer, on the other hand, is we don't have a good birth time for him. We have like a dirty data birth time for him, so I don't put up the angles. But yeah, I have been looking at him quite a bit lately. But I'll spare that for when the movie comes out, and return to him then, I guess.
We could sort of do like well, we can't really watch it all together here because it's in theaters, but maybe when it's streaming, we could do like a watch party.
Which one, the Oppenheimer or the Barbie?
Well, we could do both, but yeah, I was Oppenheimer. Yeah, we could do a live streaming watch party and discuss the charts and watch the film together.
Yeah. Watching the film together is an interesting idea. I know we've talked about doing that because of the potential in live streaming. That could be really fun. I'm always, I mean, with it being a new movie, you see, I'm one of those really irritating people that when they make a historically based movie, I'm like, that's not how it happened. Actually, actually, like the whole mansplaining. Well, actually, I become the monster
Tyson of the Astrological.
Oh God! Oh yeah. No, I'm just I'm insufferable. And probably like, yeah, if I want to keep,
according to my calculations,
okay, we're going a bit far here, but but that's me. And so like, I'd rather sort of see the movie privately and go through all that. But I mean, to me, it's important in the sense that, it's okay for filmmakers to deviate. I'll give a really good example in a minute, but just, because of what I do, I always want to be clear. I don't want a movie to mislead me. So I feel I have to get that full on sort of,
Yeah, movie theater is not a place for documentaries. Like that's
right. Yeah.
you know,
And I'm not very good company in those situations. A really great example, you know, Quentin Tarantino, when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out,
I haven't seen
which,
it yet.
oh,
I haven't seen it, but
okay. So
I do know a lot about it.
do you
Unfortunately,
know about the ending?
he changes history, kind of
Yes,
like
he
what he
does.
did in *Inglourious Bastards*. He
Exactly. And that,
changes history.
okay. And that's okay. Since you know that much, without spoiling anything, um, I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and earlier in the movie, there's a slight sort of historical. Well, actually, it's not that slight. It turns out to be an even bigger historical anomaly than I even realized at the time, because later, after seeing the movie, I would read uh, um, a really important book that the title's escaping me. Tom, what's his name? Where is he? Where is he? Yeah, Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s by Tom O'Neill, which really clarifies actually this event in the movie, where Manson went to the house where months later the murder would be committed. And the story had always been that it was a photographer photographing Sharon Tate. Charles Manson showed up at the door, and the photographer told the guy to get lost. That was the case that was made in the conviction of Charles Manson. Tom O'Neill's book reveals that that was probably a fabrication, that whole part of the story, that it probably never happened. But when I'm watching Tarantino's movie, I'm thinking in Tarantino's movie, it's Polanski himself who answers the door. And so I was all like, actually, that's not how it happened. And but then by the end of the movie, I realized, oh yeah, this is the guy who made *Inglourious Bastards*. Like, you know, this is not meant to be historical. This is meant to be
Right.
sort of like this
It's like
fiction.
correcting
Very much. Both
yeah.
endings really sort of like, you know, make you feel a lot better about, you know, in contrast to how things actually happened.
Well, I kind of feel like that with Django Unchained as well. Is that's a story about like almost like, you know,
Right.
what he wished could have happened. You know,
Sure. Yeah, Tarantino's been using cinema like in the same way we always talk about using a time machine to go back and kill Hitler. It's sort of like like using cinema.
Well, kind of like using cinema to go and kill Hitler.
Well, which is like he literally did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like
So,
in the most brutal way possible. You know?
And in a way that we can celebrate. That's the genius of
Right.
it. Because yeah, in the ending of both *Inglourious Bastards* and *Once Upon a Time in Hollywood*, they, you know, if you're sensitive to violence, it's really upsetting. But you know, if you know like the characters that it's being done to, you're like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, no,
this feels
like
so
weirdly cathartic. Yeah,
yes,
to kind
no,
of
it is
correct this, you know, terrible injustice, and just because that's what Neptune or cinema kind of allows us to do is entertain a different reality for a little while.
Indeed.
Sometimes that can be therapeutic, but you can't live there. You know, that you can't live in Neptune land.
Okay, so Jude says she doesn't like it when they change the correct history. Well, then, you know, I mean, Tarantino isn't for everybody. Anytime someone, you know, I like his work, but anytime someone says they don't like it, it's not like I'm mystified. Like you know, it either appeals or it doesn't.
Right. And, you know, and while he is very good, you know, it's not like he hits a home run every single time. No. You know, he has his own sort of.
He's got his problems. Oh, he has his problems.
You know, but man, is he ever an example of like Mercury and Aries? I mean, his writing style, the way he writes dialogue, even in his own personal speech. I think that's what's so remarkable to me is he really is like one of the characters in his movies. I mean, sometimes he literally acts in his own movies, but his own manner of speech is so Mercury and Aries. It's like, okay, wow. Yeah. You know, this guy is, you know, just going a million miles a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. I really wish we had his time of birth. He's one of the people whose horoscopes I'd love to have. Crushed Orchids, Polanski gets a pineapple shoved up his butt. I'm down for these pure evil. Yeah, no, he really is. Polanski is fascinating to me. You know, first of all, I study a lot of really distasteful people with astrology. So my interest in them is not should not be confused for fandom. Polanski is as a filmmaker, he's a really gifted artist. But I mean, that's true of Woody Allen, true of Hitchcock. All these sort of these guys who are not great human beings, but did know their way around a film studio and a film camera. But Polanski's, I've been studying him for a long, long time. He was actually really instrumental in me discovering the power of Venus retrogrades. He was a very early example of seeing them in work. But yeah, I also, if he got a pineapple shoved up his ass, I'm also sort of, not too disturbed if that happens to him compared to other people. Like if anyone else got a pineapple shoved up their ass, I'd say that's terrible. We should prosecute the person who did that. Whereas if it happened to Polanski, I might be like, well, okay, maybe,
right.
Maybe the pineapple was asking for it. So yeah, let's see.
So, I guess, oh yeah, we're talking about astrology, right? Where were we? What do you think about, I mean, I guess next month, I guess, the biggest thing is probably Venus stationing retrograde.
Yeah.
At the end of the month. Is there anything else notable about?
Well, we've just had Saturn station retrograde in Pisces. So I think like most immediately we're dealing with Saturn stuff. There's quite a bit of, it's quite a heavy duty week, all things considered. Aside from that,
one other thing that I wished we had covered in the astrology podcast episode we did on Venus, and that you've talked about before, and that I haven't heard other people talk about before, but makes a lot of sense, is that sometimes someone's experience during a Venus retrograde can be colored by a transit that is occurring to your natal Venus in the same time frame. So for example, if someone had their Venus placement at 6 degrees of Pisces, where Saturn currently is, and then Venus begins going retrograde in Leo, then you could say that person's experience of Venus retrograde would be colored by Saturn and would be more of a Saturnian sort of experience.
Yeah. Which in fact is what's happening to me. Saturn, I'm in an Aquarius perfection year. I'll be going into a Pisces perfection year with my birthday. And Saturn is just stationed opposite my Venus. My Venus is at 6 Virgo. And so, yeah, I expect this Venus retrograde to be somewhat Saturnian. My immediate guess is that I'm going to be sort of living on the opposite end of the planet from my wife for a little bit because of logistical things as we're going about our lives. But who knows what else?
Maybe under pressure. The 2nd and 8th house matters.
Sure. Yeah. It's a tricky year. I'm immigrating a family from South Africa to Canada, and there's an adoption involved and lawyers and all kinds of a lot of pressure. So yeah, I think a lot of it is just revolving around that. At the same time, I'm I think my website looks terrible and I'm redesigning it. So there's also that kind of thing.
Well, then luckily, that might be part of what Jupiter's doing, trining your Venus from the 10th, right? It's roughly within the range of the trine to your Venus. So that's, there's that kind of, positive professional component. And, we have been starting up these, these talks, these live streams. These have been good for you. So
yeah,
I think
indeed they have.
It's and if anyone watching this doesn't know, Nick and I, 8 years ago, we tried to kind of get a podcast launched at that time called I Love Astrology. And we were thinking of just like doing a reboot of it. We couldn't really figure out exactly how we were going to go about it, but then it just kind of turned into this. Yeah. So for Nick and I, this is kind of one of our kind of Venus retrograde and Leo type reunions. And then in 2007, when you released that article, that was when my mind was kind of, I was already really impressed with your work up to that point. But when I read that really like changed things for me when I saw you lay it out like that. And so I feel like the Venus retrograde thing for me kind of goes back to 2007 with you and your work.
Yeah.
Venus. So
Yeah.
this is an interesting.
And
We're on
that's
week one.
that
We'll come
was
to
a Saturn half return from where we are now,
right.
essentially. That was Saturn just about to go into Virgo at the time. Oh, we got someone from Australia. Hi, Baki24.
Wow, that must be really early.
Or really late. I
Or really
start
late.
to yeah, I think
I
really
got
early,
that.
really early. I'm in Vancouver and it's midday here, so it's probably really early. Baki, I'm not sure. I know in South Africa, Baki means like a pickup truck. Bakkie. I remember going to LA with Anna for the first time, and she saw a really big American pickup truck, and she goes, "Oh, look at that hectic Baki." And that's like, if you know South Africans, that just means like, my goodness, that's a very large pickup truck. That's South African for that. Anyway, welcome from Australia and anywhere else people are.
So people are probably curious what Venus retrograde means for them. What do you think is some like really basic ways they can analyze what this Venus retrograde should mean for them? Do you feel like Venus retrogrades are predictable in their effects? Do you feel like there's an element which is always out of reach?
No, they can be to some degree, they can be as predictable as anything else in astrology if you have if you have a context to apply it to. Sort of, broadly speaking, trying to address what Venus retrograde is going to mean for millions or billions of people at a time is a taller order. But yeah, in individual charts, I think it's somewhat predictable. And it's the kind of thing where it's a cycle that exists in and of itself, but it's constantly interacting with all the other planets. So it's sort of the whatever outcomes emerge, during Venus retrograde periods, will vary according to who's receiving them. Pixie's asking, Venus retrograde for red Venus intervals. Yeah. The Venus retrogrades are always in the red intervals. The red intervals begin with Venus's greatest elongation, and then about 73 days later, you get the interior conjunction, and then 73 days after that, the next greatest elongation. When is it too young to learn astrology? I ran into my nephew. Long story short, I was wondering if I should transfer the knowledge. His Jan 206, 8 p.m. Toronto, Kinshasa. Yeah, I don't think it's ever. Personally, I think I know a lot of people who are raised on astrology, from childhood. Doesn't seem to have damaged them overtly, other than their unfortunate friendship with me. Yeah, Patrick, you were exposed to astrology pretty young, weren't you?
Yeah, I remember reading like my horoscope and like Reader's Digest, and my first question was, well, am I a Libra or a Scorpio? Because my birthday's October 23rd, and so sometimes it would seem to apply, if I was a Libra or a Scorpio. So I went to my mom, who, I said, Mom, am I a Libra or am I a Scorpio? And she, my mom, was an astrologer. Because I didn't really know that. I didn't really understand that as a child. I mean, I know she would say sometimes things like, oh, Edward's being such a Libra right now, or my father, oh, he's being such an Aquarius right now. But or she'd blame things on Mercury retrograde, because Mercury retrograde affected our household a lot, with a lot of Mercury retrograde natives living there. So yeah, she told me, well, actually, you are a Libra. And I said, well, how do you know that? How do you know? And then she's like, well, because I took your time down at birth, obviously. Like, I have your chart. And so then I'm like, well, what does it say? And then she, gave me a little sort of snippet, as much as she could. She tried to sort of tell me in a the way that you would to a child. And I kept reading my horoscope, and then around like 14 to 15, that was when I started researching more about astrology online, and I went through my mom's book collection. And then by 2005, March 2005, was when I joined the MySpace group. That was at my loosing of the bond.
And then some creepy guy in his 30s started talking to you.
Yeah, so that's when I met Chris and Nick in March of 2005. The actual story is a little cringe, but But the
Cringy
important
because I was
thing,
cringy because I was a 36-year-old talking to a
no,
17-year-old.
cringy on my part, because I like started this like group on MySpace where it was about like matching people's like astrological compatibility for like romance or something like that. And like I remember Chris reaching out to me by MySpace message saying like, "Hey, maybe you should join the MySpace group." You know, I mean, maybe you should join a horoscopic astrology group on MySpace. And I'm like, "Oh wow, this is bigger than I thought." You know, that was my first real exposure to like professional astrologers and traditional astrology and Hellenistic astrology and like the kind of Neo-Babylonian approach that Nick has, and then that was when we connected on there too. So really, you know,
I remember
March
that.
2005, that Sun Venus exterior conjunction in my 9th house on my Jupiter, that was, you know, a life-changing
That was a big deal for all of us.
moment. You know, it was within days of my loosing of the bond on level 2 on Spirit. It was right after I turned 17, or you know, a few months afterward. And yeah, my life was never the same after that, because I spent hours, you know, on this farm and just taking in as much as possible. And then like within a year, I was at Hindsight and, you know, meeting you for the first time and meeting Chris for the first time. And so to answer the question, because I'm terrible at being concise, I think there's age appropriate ways to talk about astrology to young people. You know, I don't think, you know, sometimes my kids have had questions and I've been kind of hesitant about, like, I don't want to feel like I'm like, I don't know, preaching to them. I want them to make up their own minds about astrology. I don't want to, you know, if they grow up to be skeptics, so be it. Like in some ways, I've kind of been very more hands off with teaching astrology to my own children, but they've learned so much just from being in the culture.
Yeah.
Like, you know, my kids know about Mercury retrograde. My kids know about like all the stereotypes of the signs. Like, you know, I would hear like, well, he's 9 now, but you know, he was like 7 years old and he was like having a problem with the TV remote and he was just going, "Ugh, Mercury retrograde." I'm like, how do you we never talked about this. How do you know about this?
Yeah, they pick it up. They pick it up.
Yeah, he and he was correct, actually. It was a Mercury retrograde in that
There
time.
you go. There you go. It's in the genes.
But it's actually probably the one that this might sound kind of weird, but the person I'm proudest of for having introduced to astrology, okay, what's a simple way to explain this? My wife's sister's ex-husband's new girlfriend's daughter
Okay.
was she was maybe like 12 or 13 or so, and her mother was like really, really super Christian, ultra conservative, you know, very hostile to like anything that was kind of outside of that. And it's just so funny because you know, my daughter became really good friends with her daughter, and she was kind of a big sister to her and treated her really well, and she was really, really nice. But you could also sort of tell that, I don't know, she was cut from a different cloth than her mother, and you know, was maybe more sort of open to things. But it just so happened that I'd given an astrology book as a gift to my wife's sister, and she had left that book when she left the house after the divorce. And apparently the daughter discovered that book that had been left there. So I didn't give it to her directly, but she discovered something that I had left for, you know,
your sister-in-law.
My sister-in-law. So she discovered this and she learned astrology from that book. And then like the next time our families sort of came into some sort of interaction, she asked me all these questions about astrology, and I was like, "How do you know all this?" And because you're definitely not letting. And she's like, "Well, from your book, from the book you left, because I think I must have left a note in there or something."
What was the book? I'm curious.
Oh, it was just the only astrology book you'll ever need. You know, it was just something like that, just because you know her sister-in-law had expressed some interest in astrology, and I just wanted to give us something with, like some sort of basic primer.
This is the only book you'll ever need.
Yeah, I mean, biggest lie ever told. But I was just really glad that I was able to give her that, because she would not have been able to have gotten that information any other way. I feel like, of course,
Yeah.
she could have Googled it or something, but I didn't know how much
Well
that was being
done,
surveilled.
Watson.
So I'm
Well
really
done.
glad that she had that opportunity to learn about it, because she seemed to get a lot out of it, and actually seemed to have had fairly advanced knowledge, for someone who's only like 13 or 14.
That's
And
fantastic. I hope she goes on to be like this world-class
yeah,
astrologer.
I hope she ends up being able to say like, oh, Patrick Watson was the reason. Maybe, I would be
Good stuff.
happy if that was what happened.
It's funny. Well, we should touch on we've been getting a few questions while we've been rambling. This hasn't been the most astrology intensive version of our live stream, to be fair. Some of it is I have a bunch of Venus stuff I want to talk about, but I'm sort of saving it for after the episode comes out, because once you've seen the episode with Chris, then we can sort of use the live stream as a sort of part 2 of what we talked about there, because like we were saying, there's a lot of stuff we left out, but I want to leave that stuff until like next week's live stream. Hopefully people are okay with that, but I do want to answer the questions that are at least coming up now, so we can feel like people didn't sit through all this ramble for absolutely nothing. So Sarah Fruman asked, any difference in Venus retrograde periods if you have Venus retrograde natally? It depends on how you want to phrase it. Lots of people who don't have natal Venus retrograde, the transit can still be absolutely very, very powerful. As someone with Venus retrograde natally, it can also be powerful for you. But what's even more likely is if you have Venus retrograde natally, you can be part of someone else's Venus retrograde transit, if you know what I mean, like a sort of agent of that. In fact, you know what? I'm going to actually share one example. This is a pretty good one.
In other words, if you don't have Venus retrograde, then Venus retrograde happens to you. But if you have Venus retrograde, then
it can happen to you, but you are Venus retrograde as well. Yeah. And of course, despite we almost got through the whole episode without talking about a certain someone.
Oh,
no. And now but I promise you, this is really good. This is really good. Okay, so natally, the dude. I got all his.
Don't make me think about William Barr's Venus.
No, I know.
This tosser.
Yeah. God. Where am I looking for him? There he is. Okay, so yeah, Trump doesn't have Venus retrograde. He's a black 3. But the period I'm going back to, the last red 5. He announced his candidacy when Venus was 28 days before the retrograde station. And then the primary debates, with the other Republicans, these started when Venus was retrograde in Leo here on his, on his ascendant and on the descendant of the evening, along with Mercury and Jupiter. So this first debate, this one in Cleveland, this is the one where, he got the most notable thing, I think, from this debate was he got into this ridiculous tussle with Megyn Kelly.
Measuring contest.
Well, it was the thing.
This is the other.
This is the Megyn Kelly thing.
Okay,
right?
gotcha.
So like this is when it all happened. Like, I mean, they would keep sort of sniping at each other from here on. She would be a moderator at another debate a little while later, and that was more civil somehow. But this is the one where they really get into, you remember anyway. I don't have to quote him now. Okay, now here's the interesting thing. So he doesn't have Venus retrograde.
But she does.
Well, not only does she, I'm just going to take you through this, okay? As I wander through here. So this is my Trump file. There's 286 charts. There's all kinds of people in here. Even just like people, like Andrew Dice Clay is in here because he was on the Celebrity Apprentice, or LaToya Jackson. But amongst them, but it's all mixed in with like the likes of Jamie Dimon or Carly Fiorina. She's one of the people I want to look at. Carly Fiorina. Who else am I looking for here? Okay, John Kasich, Ben Carson, Trump. I'll just throw him in there. Who else am I looking for here? 1962. I'm looking for Chris Christie. I'm looking for Rand Paul. Can you see where I'm going with this? You're looking at these dates, Watson. Do you see what I'm getting at? Here's Megan
These
Kelly.
are
Here's Ted.
people involved with the primary campaign on the
These are
DSP side.
Yeah, these are the people involved at this time. Rubio. I forget who I'm. Scott Walker.
I thought
Who else am I leaving out here? I've got almost everyone. I'm missing a couple. All right, they'll have to sort of. Oh yeah, Jeb Bush, of course.
Low energy Jeb.
All right.
What
I think I'm leaving out 1, 2, 3 others, but let's start with these. This is pretty good. Unless who the hell else am I forgetting here? Well, anyway. Okay, so Trump doesn't have natal Venus retrograde, but he gets involved in this whole tussle with Megyn Kelly. And yeah, Megyn Kelly does have Venus retrograde. So she is part of his Venus retrograde transit. He's getting into this ridiculous pissing contest with her. But then most of the other, even Trump himself doesn't have Venus retrograde, but Ben Carson does. John Kasich is one of the only ones who doesn't. Kasich and Rubio. Oh yeah, I know who I'm leaving out. Huckabee. Huckabee also doesn't. Huckabee is a blue 5, born in 55. There we are. He's the guy I was trying to remember. So the ones who don't have Venus retrograde on the stage, it's easier to say the ones who don't than the ones who do. Out of everyone on this list from Trump down, the only ones who didn't have Venus retrograde were Kasich, Rubio, and Huckabee. But Ted Cruz is born. He's a red 2. He's born with Venus 21 days after the direct station. So Cruz is a red 2. Megyn Kelly is a red 2. Scott Walker is a red 5. Venus just coming out of the retrograde there. He's born how many days after the direct station? 43. So it's headed towards the greatest elongation. But Scott Walker is a red 5. Rand Paul is a red 2. That's Venus quite close. 35 days, okay, from the station. He's a red 2. Chris Christie is a red 2. He's born 46 days before the retrograde station. So you can see some of them are closer to the greatest elongation, but it's really such a concentration. It's notable. Carly Fiorina, she's a red 2. She is also like Chris Christie. She's born like 8 years exactly before Chris Christie, and she has Venus 48 days. So that's another greatest elongation. Jeb Bush is a red 1 with Venus about to station retrograde 39 days. So also close to the greatest elongation. And Ben Carson, as I showed earlier, is Venus retrograde. So most of the people on that stage, including the moderator, were born in red intervals. And Megyn Kelly, specifically had Venus retrograde in Scorpio. And so this is what I'm talking about. Like, it's fine. Like, you hate Trump. I do too. But if you're looking at his chart, you're looking at things from his perspective. That's what empathy means. You don't have to be sympathetic. You're being empathetic. You're looking at his chart and seeing the world from his eyes, horrifying as the thought may be. And to him, Megyn Kelly is a Venus retrograde force. Like, why is this woman asking all these unfair questions and all this, like the kind of stuff he said. I love the face you're making, but you know what I mean? That's sort of that's part of the whole thing. And of course he's, this whole Venus retrograde in Leo, this is like when he announced his campaign, the first slide I showed a little, when Venus was, in the red 5, but not yet retrograde. This is when he said that stuff about, people from Mexico and all that famous stuff. So yeah, he's really, he's irritating everyone. This is really the red 5 of 2015 is when he's really just sort of saying all this stuff that is shocking people. Oh yeah, that was the other thing at the debate I was showing, that first debate. Megyn Kelly says, you said all these terrible things about women, and he goes, only what's her name? Only Rosie O'Donnell, and all that stuff. So yeah,
right, yeah.
Yeah. But my point being, even though he didn't have Venus retrograde, that Venus retrograde was crossing his ascendant, and he's on stage debating mostly red interval people. And the moderator is a red interval person, and you can just see. So like that's the sort of the power of the surrounding. This goes back to like what I was talking about earlier when you're studying like a film or television production, and you don't just look at the intervals of the actors. Look at the director, the writer, the cinematographer, even the makeup or special effects people they might be relevant to. There's so much you can get out of sort of learning.
It's kind of weird though that he wasn't a red too in that phase, like because he was in some ways more like the Venus retrograde force in that situation. He was the one who was upending the norms. The Venus in that case, it was like a lot of the reds were like having to like push back against this kind of unruly force. Because I think for Trump the big thing with his Venus is that it's like with Saturn in his 12th, and I think that accounts for the fact that he has the force of desire in his life has had a deleterious effect on other people and ultimately on himself, because he's now been convicted of sexual assault of Jean Carroll, and that was just one of the many credible accusations made against him over the course of his life. I'm not saying that every person who has Venus conjunct Saturn and Cancer in the 12th house has been, has done this, but I think, on a very general level, we can see how Venus is going to end up, being in some ways distorted towards more negative outcomes with the conjunction of Saturn, and then in the 12th house of enemies, and this is going to show that this is something which works against him. That the desire leads him astray into bad places.
But I think to go to your point, this was just the sort of time for him to do these things. I mean, he, talk about changing consensus, right? I mean, he's suddenly doing all this stuff that anyone with any common sense would say, well, if you're running for office, you never just like outright insult immigrants or outright insult women. Like that's not supposed to work. And suddenly a lot of people were okay with that as far as like a campaign strategy goes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because I think in the final count, he only won a plurality of GOP primary voters' votes. He didn't win a majority. Most GOP primary voters actually voted for a different candidate, but the issue was that there were too many other candidates. They weren't able to coalesce around one alternative, and thus Trump won by default rather than by actually he convinced a critical mass of people, but not enough to really be a majority. But then, of course, once you get into general election math, then that's when people are voting for people for their party, even if you're not terribly enthusiastic about them as a candidate. So then that accounts for the other 2/3 of the GOP primary voters. I don't want to give them any kind of pass.
Well, no, look, it is what it is.
But we're just
talking about history here.
Right.
I'm gonna have to end the show. We've gone to the 2-hour mark, and I have to be somewhere in an hour, in less than an hour. I want to answer Victoria's question. You are a red 2, Victoria, just so you know. And if you don't know already, I have a video on my YouTube channel called Introduction to the Venus Synodic Cycle. It breaks down and explains the red intervals, the blue intervals, the white intervals, the black intervals, how they're calculated, to some extent what they mean, although we're still sort of really exploring what they mean astrologically, as as part of what this live stream is about, is exploring that. So we'll get into that. Crushed Orchids is asking questions that we can still we can still answer in a week or in a year, but touching on stuff that we've already talked about. So Crushed Orchids, we'll leave that one dangling, as it were. We will pick this up where we left off next week, by which time I believe that the Astrology podcast episode will be out. So then you'll at least have that to sort of I imagine next week's live stream will be sort of a reaction to a part 2 of what we covered with Chris the other day.
Yeah.
Make sense to you?
Yeah. That sounds good.
All right, cool. So Patrick, give us some plugs. Well, your site, you
can find my work and my services at patrickwatsоnastrology.com. You can find me on Twitter and other places at pwatsonastro, right there where you can see my name.
All right. And my website is nickdaganbestastrologer.com. And I'm on YouTube, Twitter, and wherever you're local. We've really expanded our social media these days.
Right.
Although I can't stream on some of these newer places yet. But the time will come when we can. But anyway, do look out for us, and we'll be live streaming again next Sunday, doing the team stream. Tomorrow I'm doing my solo stream, so if you want to hear me ramble without Patrick's feedback, the chance to do that is on Mondays. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern. And so I'll see some of you tomorrow, hopefully all of you tomorrow, hopefully even more of you tomorrow, or whoever wants to come. And and Patrick, I'll see you next Sunday. Thanks for engaging conversation as always, Patrick. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.